Now, if you've wanted to go faster Vauxhall over the years, there are 3 letters that were the first stop: VXR. But actually, Vauxhall quietly put that nameplate out to pasture over the past couple of years, although we are told it will return in the not too distant future. No, if you want a fast Vauxhall, you've been looking at another 3 letters: GSi, a reborn nameplate from the brand's past. We've got the refreshed Vauxhall Insignia here today, and this is the GSi. Now, I know Vauxhall saloon cars are tarred with the same typical boring brush, but I have to say, this latest generation of the Insignia looks really good. I mean, properly executive. I mean, not only do you have the stereotypical symbol of something being premium with that broad grille, but there are really nice subtle details, like that crease that runs down the middle of the bonnet. You've got that character line that swoops up the door, and this line in particular has become something of a staple with Insignias over the generations. And of course, because this one is the saloon, you've got that really steeply raked roofline that slopes down to the tail. It looks premium, but above all, it looks interesting, and that's sort of an injection Vauxhall has needed over the years. Now, as mentioned at the top of the video, this is the GSi, the top dog when it comes to fast Insignias, and they're denoted by these really lovely 20-inch alloy wheels. You get some chrome intake surrounds at the front, reprofiled front and rear bumpers. The whole thing just takes on a more muscular, more serious stance, and I have to say, it really works. And the sporting feel continues on the inside. The cabin is dominated by 2 large sports seats. I mean, they are really aggressively bolstered things, denoting that this is very much a GSi, in case you hadn't noticed already. You can electronically manipulate these seats just about any way you like, even with bolster adjustment. They're heated, they're cooled, and they're massaging. But sadly, something else they are is a little bit uncomfortable, because despite all of the adjustment, they're just not the sort of seats you want to spend a few hours in. Shy of the flat bottom steering wheel, the cabin is pretty much standard Insignia, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Over the previous generation, material quality has taken a huge step upwards, and likewise with design. The centre console hosts an 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system, with Vauxhall's native software actually being pretty easy to use. It's responsive, but more importantly compatible with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Another nice touch is that things like air conditioning controls have been maintained as physical buttons. In the back, you'll find seating for 3 with plenty of legroom, although the middle passenger does have to contend with a sizable transmission hump. These back seats can be heated, which is something of a consolation for those of the tall variety and lacking some headroom. Open that sloping tailgate to reveal a 490-litre boot. Now, it's a big, wide, very usable space, but not necessarily the tallest. Fold the rear bench flat via the useful 40-20-40 split, and you'll have 1,450 litres at your disposal. So, sporty trinkets aside, what exactly makes a GSi a GSi? Well, let's start with the engine under the bonnet. That's a new 2-litre turbocharged unit. It's different from the previous Insignia GSi that came along. It produces 237 brake horsepower and 350 newton meters of torque. That's good for getting this car from 0 to 62 miles per hour in 7 seconds. Now, the bad news is that that engine is actually down on power in comparison to the old engine, and the reason the engine was replaced in the first place is due to emissions. However, you don't really notice it. 0 to 62 in 7 is plenty good enough for this, and once you get past that initial little bit of turbo lag, the torque pickup is actually pretty good. Something else GSIs have over their lesser counterparts is selectable all-wheel drive. So by default, it's a front-wheel drive car, but if you decide you need a bit of added grip, you prod this all-wheel drive button down here and all 4 wheels hook up. Beyond the obvious traction advantage, there's also a series of clutch packs in this drivetrain, and that means that advanced torque vectoring can be going on whilst you're really pushing the car. And yeah, overall the chassis does feel really sorted as a result. You can feel it sort of cling and pull itself in tighter to the apex of bends. It's a very competent package beneath you. What I like much less is the steering, which is light and devoid of feel. It's very precise, but it's a total detachment from what's going on, and that's a real shame. This sort of woolly steering kills the driving involvement for me, I have to say. Something else I don't really like is the 9-speed automatic transmission, because it is perfectly fine just driving around, slots itself into gears quite imperceptibly, but whenever you try and take manual control via these paddles, it is horribly slow. I mean, really hesitant, and sometimes it might just totally ignore you when you pull a paddle. I've had that a few times. But even in auto mode, starting to drive the car hard, it's just a bit indecisive and hesitant and just not there with the rest of the car, which is a real shame for something that's trying to sell itself as a sportier alternative to the mainstream. What I can't quibble about are those Brembo brakes that you can see peering through those 20-inch alloy wheels. They're really good. They've got a lot of bite to them, lots of reassurance, and you can modulate the pedal really nicely as well. The Insignia GSi comes with a series of selectable drive modes, and as you guessed, normal is your base level, and here things like the adaptive dampers are in a happy medium sort of state, and they do a pretty good job at soaking up the lumps and bumps the road has to offer. Of course, the larger 20-inch alloy wheels don't really help things. There's a bit of road noise. You do get the occasional shudder through the cabin, but generally speaking, the car feels competent. It doesn't feel loose. It's got good body control. Turn things into touring and things loosen up a little more. The suspension becomes more supple, the steering a bit lighter, and the throttle response not quite as sharp, and this is ideal for cruising and clocking up bigger miles. The most aggressive setting is Sport, where you do get some more weight into the typically light steering. It's still not quite enough for me, and to be honest with you, Sport doesn't feel like too much of a step up from normal. Yes, you do get that increased throttle response, but generally speaking, I think normal's the best setting for the car. There's something nice to say about Sport is that it doesn't totally ruin the ride. You can tell that this has been engineered on British roads, because a lot of Sport modes just tighten everything up to the point where they become a bit backbreaking on our less than perfect tarmac, whereas this still keeps a little bit of suppleness to it. It's not necessarily that the Insignia GSi is bad on twisting country roads, it's just not the most engaging or enjoyable car in the class, and I feel that more could be had out of this package. There's a general sense of detachment, and it's maybe not as sporty as a sporting model should be. It's a shame because, as I've said, the chassis feels like it's a really well-engineered thing. It's just this package doesn't seem to get the most out of it. Okay, so the car's not as athletic as something we would perhaps like with the GSi badge on it. However, it does the other side of the coin pretty well, the one that just whisks itself down the motorway. It's really comfortable and remarkably quiet whenever it's on a smooth, flat surface. You do get a bit of road noise from the wheels, but wind noise is almost totally absent. It's quite eerie, and the engine really does settle down, and it's a really lovely, refined thing to cover big distances in. And I suppose when you actually sit down and think about how people will use this car, primarily as something to cover decent distances, quite possibly as a company car, then maybe Vauxhall have got their priorities in the right place. But that then opens up a bigger question of whether the Insignia GSi is necessarily the right Insignia for you. The Vauxhall Insignia range as a whole has taken a big step forwards, and the latest series of updates and new powertrain options only serve to reinforce that. This GSi version is a bit more questionable. At £38,125, that is a lot of money for a car that faces a lot of strong competition at that price point. And it's maybe not quite the performance car that VXR fans would be looking for. Our advice would actually be to look a little lower down in the range, where you'll find Insignias that are pretty much as quick as this car, but a better and more rounded package. And certainly if you're a long distance traveller in these vehicles, then the diesels make plenty of sense still. Head to yesauto.com for the latest car news and reviews, and don't forget to check us out on social media. We're in all the usual places such as Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Simply search for Yes Auto.